Mr. Chairman. Dr. Omarova, a lot has been said about your background. Let me ask you, my understanding is that your grandmother was orphaned because Stalin sent her entire family to Siberia and they died there. Is that true?
That is absolutely true.
And what did that teach you about the communist system?
What that taught me about the communist system is that it is oppressive, it doesn't care about human beings, and it kills its own citizens for no other reason but a refusal to follow what an oppressive state government ideology tells them to do. What that taught me also is that in that system, you do what you have to do to survive, so you can fight against it. I chose to come to this country. I chose to become a U.S. citizen. And in everything I do, no matter how people may interpret my academic work, my one goal is to make this country better and stronger so we can never have a repetition of that communist system anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I think only when, as my parents came from a communist system, only when you live in such a system can you understand what is necessary to survive. But you seek to ultimately revolt against it in every way you can, and those have different manifestations to it. It also teaches us that under such a system, freedom of thought, academic thought, is not something that is truly free. Is that true?
That is absolutely true.
And so when you are pursuing academic thought, it is a question of exploring out of the box. It does not necessarily mean that such thoughts are, at the end of the day, the pragmatic thoughts that you would put into place if you had the power to do so.
Senator, you're absolutely correct. I've lived for many years in a system where I was afraid to speak my mind. Everybody was afraid to speak my mind. Academic freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of speech are something that I value incredibly deeply and personally in this country.
Let me ask you something that would be specific to your job. The Community Reinvestment Act is an important civil rights law. I hope upon your confirmation that you work on a revamped CRA rule that will deal with some of the challenges we have with minority, small and mid-sized business owners, lack of access to credit, a problem particularly evidenced in minority communities hit disproportionately hard by the pandemic. What changes do you think the OCC should implement to ensure that banks through the CRA are better serving minority businesses?
So thank you, Senator. I agree with you that the Community Reinvestment Act is a critical civil rights era law, and I'm glad that financial regulators, banking regulators, including the current acting comptroller of the currency, are working together on modernizing the framework for assessing the performance of our banks with respect to channeling credit into low and moderate income communities, communities of color, rural areas, and other current banking deserts. If confirmed as the comptroller, I intend to take the CRA performance and the implementation of the newly revamped rule very seriously. The OCC's primary toolkit is, of course, supervision. And I would want to talk to the professionals at the OCC about what they see as the key issues on the ground that stand in the way of making sure that our banks fulfill their CRA duties properly.
Right. And then finally, I think maybe some within the financial institutions who oppose your nomination is because you're not from the same old boy system, and therefore are concerned about how you might ultimately regulate. There have been some of the biggest high-profile scandals at banks like Wells Fargo. These scandals not only cause direct harm to consumers, they erode trust in the financial system, and the old boy system seemed to have let them do exactly that. If confirmed, how would you improve oversight of large financial institutions to prevent such scandals and risk as these that have been talked about? And do you believe that when examiners are embedded in financial institutions, they run the risk of becoming too familiar with the institution they regulate, resulting in regulatory capture?
Yes, thank you so much for your question. I think it's a very important issue. I have deep respect for bank examiners at the OCC and other banking agencies. I realize how hard that job is. But I also understand that allowing particularly large financial institutions to repeatedly commit fraud and hurt their customers seriously undermines the trust and confidence in our banking system. And I think it's the job of a fair and impartial regulator that stands in the shoes of the American public to enforce the laws as they're written and to make sure that they use all the tools in their toolkit to ensure that such things do not happen anymore.